The Tao is nameless and unchanging. Though it appears insignificant, nothing in the world can contain it. If a ruler abides by its principles, then her people will willingly follow. Heaven would rain on earth, like sweet rain falling on paradise. People would have no need for laws, because the law would be written on their hearts. Naming is a necessity for order, but naming cannot order all things. Naming often makes things impersonal, so we should know when naming should end. Knowing when to stop naming, you can avoid the pitfall it brings. All things end in the Tao, just as the small streams and largest rivers flow through valleys to the sea. So in this chapter, we get a little bit of a look at what may have been Lao Tzu's ideal for a perfect society. We'll get into that in a second, but first I do want to take a minute to cover the little reminder we get in this chapter of what is said in chapter 1, that names and titles are not precise and are only words that we use to refer to things. Naming things does not mean we understand them, and this is especially true for something as incomprehensible as the Tao. Of course, we need to have names for things so that we can refer to them, but we need to be careful lest we think that we truly understand something just because we know its name. When we observe a friend having a hard time, we may come closer to them to try to understand what is going on. However, often if we are told at some point, "Oh, she has depression," or "Oh, he has PTSD," it's almost as if we stop trying to understand them and what they're going through, just because we can now name it. One person's struggles may be similar to another's, but they are not exactly the same, even if they share a label. And being able to put a name on something should not mean that we stop trying to understand a person and what they're going through. I was diagnosed as a child with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, also known, as I'm sure most of you are aware, as ADHD. At the time, it felt great to finally have a name for the symptoms I was experiencing. It felt vindicating and validating, because I felt like I finally had a reason for what I was going through, and it wasn't just that I was stupid or lazy. However, as I have gone on in life, I found that my symptoms don't always quite fit in with the exact mold we call ADHD. And in researching and interacting with other people who have been similarly diagnosed, I've discovered that I'm not the only one. Actually, there is some research just starting to come out that questions whether we're not just a little too quick to diagnose ADHD, especially in young children. Misdiagnosis can result in people thinking that they have conditions they might not have, and even erroneous prescription of medications, which is kind of a big deal. I understand that this may be the exception more than the rule. I'm not a medical professional or a mental health practitioner, and at the end of the day, this is all just my opinion. And I'm also not saying that we shouldn't try to understand and treat mental illness, quite the opposite. I'm just pointing out a possible example from my life of how emphasis on putting names on things can lead to errors if we're not careful. Now I want to take a second and focus on some of the lines in the middle of the chapter. If a ruler abides by its principles, meaning the Tao, then her people will willingly follow. Heaven would rain on earth, like sweet rain falling on paradise. People would have no need for laws because the law would be written on their hearts. At the end of the day, laws are in place to try and protect us from ourselves. However, if we all really followed the Tao, these laws would not be necessary at all. We would already be at a state of oneness with all things and with each other, and we could be counted on to act accordingly without having to be compelled to do so. While this is certainly a wonderful prospect, at this point in time, it is just that, a prospect, which does not currently reflect reality. The current reality of the world is that pretty much nobody is living completely in harmony with Tao, not even you or me. And anybody who thinks they are completely in harmony with Tao is probably farther away from it than most. If we compare ourselves to others, if we ever experience jealousy or envy, if we ever act or speak out of resentment towards another person, we are not in total harmony with Tao, not because we don't measure up, or because somebody is going to cross our names off some cosmic list, but because we do not exist in a state that is conducive to total harmony. Oneness cannot coexist with separation, which is what we embody when we act or think in these ways. But although we need to be aware of this, we shouldn't beat ourselves up about it either. Being in harmony with Tao is the goal, but it's a goal that will probably take more than a lifetime to accomplish. All the teachings of Taoism, or philosophy and religion in general, are to help us to come as close to this as possible, not through forcing ourselves to behave differently, but to help us to approach the Tao in such a way that it permeates and changes us to an ever-increasing degree. I think it's pretty obvious, however, that this is just not currently the case. As Taoists, we understand that there is no point in agonizing over this, or trying to force society to be something it isn't. Instead, we acknowledge the current state of affairs, and accept the need for governance and laws to maintain some kind of order, because even though we know that it is not ideal, it is better than the alternative. Laws will only be rendered unnecessary when all people are in harmony with Tao. Until this happens, we have to just do the best we can with what we have. And remember, this isn't everyone else's fault. This is our fault too, because we also are not totally in harmony with Tao. But as we learn and apply true principles to our lives, we can certainly get much closer. Thanks for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow for chapter 33. Peace and blessings.